We're going to get started in just a minute. Let's give everybody one more minute to log in and get on the call. Thanks. Okay. Welcome. Bob Buchanan here, Executive Vice President of Sales of RapidScale, and would like to welcome everybody to the December edition of RapidScale's Cloud Empower monthly webinar. I'd like to make some great content here today for you, but before we get started, just make a few comments. Obviously, 2018 is about to wrap up. 2019 is going to be upon us quicker than you know, and I wanted to thank everybody for making this a great year. The economy's been great. RapidScale had a wonderful year. We shared in a lot of successes. We couldn't have done it without you. And thank you. We're in the final stretch. There's anything that you need from our team to help with these deals that might still remain. We're all hands on deck. Also, as we look ahead for 2019, we're already examining kind of the content and how we might be able to further improve sessions. So if you have any recommendations, you want to give us some feedback, you can come to me, Summer Fagoni, or your channel manager directly. As always, I want to mention that the chat will be available during the call, and if you have questions that you'd like us to answer today, we will get to those at the end. We will be recording the session, and we'll send it out to everybody who registered for the session today. So once again, thank you. Looking forward to finishing out the year. A great 2019. Let's make it even better. And with that, without further ado, I wanted to introduce Duncan McDonald, Director of Product Development. Duncan today is kind of our de facto expert on Managed Office 365, and he's got some great selling tips, specifically 5 ways to drive positive upsell. So Duncan, thanks so much for joining us today, and I'll turn it over to you, buddy.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you everybody for joining. As Bob pointed out, I am new to RapidScale, but certainly not new to the industry. I may have come across some of you previously in my former life at Navisite, where I spent close to 10 years in product development there. I've now transitioned over to RapidScale to join the team as Director of Product Development for RapidScale, and I'm excited at the forward-facing opportunity for to grow the portfolio into 2019 and beyond. So with that in mind, today is about Managed Office 365 and 5 ways that we can drive positive upsell. So Managed Office 365 has been kind of in my DNA, certainly for the last 5 years, and messaging a lot longer beyond that, probably closer to 20 years. So let's dive into this, and hopefully you'll get some great feedback from this. So the agenda today, I'm going to give some feedback on just basic sales value, and then we're going to jump into the 5 tenets that we're going to sort of follow. A little bit on the compliance story, a little bit on mobility, something on security, Azure Active Directory, which I think is a gray area for a lot of people, and then understanding Teams, which is really the sort of collaboration hub point for Managed Office 365, and it's really where Microsoft are focusing the centralized collaborative effort for Office 365 today, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end if there's time. So the title here, we are all doctors. So this is very true sort of in the sales scenario. Just like a doctor has to, we have to understand the pain of our clients. And understanding the client's pain is really at the heart of what we do. And we do this using a number of techniques, just like a physician does. We have to be direct with our questions. We have to understand what their journey is, how they got to where they've got to today, And we do this in a number of ways. I like to use tools when I go through that prognosis, using questionnaires, using calculators. I've been very, very effective. And going forward, we're going to start being a lot more pragmatic using that approach. We're going to help you to be a lot better at diagnosing the pain of our clients. We're going to help you be a lot more effective at understanding the pain, being a lot more turnkey at selling the solutions that we put in front of you. Also, you have to be good at the art of listening, be empathetic, and relate to the issues that are front and center as well. Providing a solution. Well, doctors do this as well, right? They diagnose and then they hand out pills. Well, we're not handing out pills, we're handing out a solution, and hopefully that solution addresses the problem that's front and center in front of the client. Hopefully it solves the issue. So we do that by in a sales scenario, we do that by answering those pain points. In today's sales world, we tell stories. We bring in third-party validation, and we speak to the solution at hand by validating it, validating the solution, validating the experts who deliver and manage and implement the solution as well. So enough on that. Let's dive into the meat that we're here to understand and help you guys really deliver some value. So the compliance story. So Office 365 out of the door is getting on for sort of 7 years, 8 years old now. And out of the door, it really wasn't that compliant beyond the infrastructure layer. Today, it's a lot more compliant across a lot more governance standards. It's ISO 27001, it's SSAE 16, SOC 1, SOC 2 compliant, HIPAA, PCI as well. But it's important to understand that these controls are delivered at multiple layers. And I'm not going to dive too deep in this. We can certainly dive a lot deeper. You can meet with your account managers. We can get you data points on this as and when you need them. But my intent here is to deliver this at a high level so that you can have at least the preliminary discussions with clients, understanding that compliance is delivered at 2 layers. Back-end controls, so we're talking about non-client-facing controls, things such as logging, encryption at rest, port scanning, URL scanning, all the things that are at the sort of data center layer. And then there are other back-end controls, things that we do every day, badge scanning, all the things that are at the data center layer to ensure that you know, bad people can't get into the physical data center as well. So there are other controls that I haven't mentioned here that are absolutely there as well. And then there's front-end controls, the client-facing controls. And again, I've kind of just touched the surface here, things such as DLP, email encryption, rights management, SMIME, all of the controls that the client has in their hand that they can actually configure, that they can actually are tangible to them in terms of I can actually make changes to these controls and actually have some level of manipulation over how this affects my environment. So it's important to understand that these controls, there's 2 layers of them, and 1 layer is infrastructure, 1 layer is client facing. So from a buyer perspective, it's important to understand, is the client in a regulated industry? Is the client in a secure, or is the client's environment secure, or is remote security a concern? Do they struggle with administration of compliance? I certainly over my career have met so many regulated industries, and I'm sure all of you have as well, where the client claims that they certainly are in a regulated industry, but they have no idea how to get from A to B. And so understanding not just that they're in a regulated industry, but what are their pains with that regulation? Are they having problems administering it? Do they not understand what the controls are? Or the 4th point, which is probably the most important, has compliance become such a burden to them that compliance has become a primary function of their IT as opposed to running of their business? That one, for me, has probably become one of the most massive selling points of compliance over anything else. Because let's face it, if you're running a business and it's, say, in the healthcare vertical, you as an IT shop, you don't want to become a compliance shop. Your job as an IT shop needs to be running the core function of your business, not as a compliance vertical. So the buyer provocations on the right, and I'm not going to read through all of these, need to be that as a managed service provider, we lift and shift that compliance burden and let you run your core business. And that becomes the buyer provocation as opposed to we just provide compliance. No, we shift the burden of compliance away from you so you can concentrate on your core focus, which is your business. And that's the big point here. So let's move on to the mobility story. Mobility is a big selling point in 365, but I think it's undersold. So I don't think anybody is even aware that native mobility exists in 365 today. So in Office 365, you can turn on native MDM, and it's a flip of a switch. You can turn it on. Now, there's no, I want to be clear here, there's no upselling doing that today. Now, down the road, we RapidScale are going to monetize this. Today, there is no monetizing of this. I mention this because it's still important as a potential value add to a client. It's still important to be transparent with your clients and let them know that from the mobility landscape, there are multiple options in mobility. There is native MDM, which is the enriched features that already exist in 365. 365 out of the box will already support iOS, Android, Windows 10, and it will already support things like PIN lock, unauthorized access, remove corporate data while leaving your personal data intact. All of those features, 5 years ago, you had to go to a mobile device or a mobile device management solution or an enterprise mobility management solution to get, but these are all baked into, embedded into the 365 solution today. Now, having said that, this is MDM Lite. If you're talking to an enterprise or a customer that cares more about the security and the management of it, where they want to be able to control the users, control the workspace, they want to be able to manage those devices, they want to be able to enroll devices with policy management, they want to be able to bake in the ability to control which applications are on the device, have policies that restrict who can cut, copy, paste, have security policies that say, I want to control what can be browsed on that device, or mobile application policies that say which applications are allowed, which applications are not allowed, then you need to go the next layer, which is Microsoft Intune. And that is a fully baked, fully paid for version. Monetizing that absolutely is the next layer. So I want to be 100% transparent and throw it out there again, that the first layer is not monetized today. Going into 2019, we're going to monetize this through a support layer. It's not today, but this is something that we're absolutely going to look at. The second layer, Intune, absolutely. It's around about $7. It is a monetized layer. So let's look again at the pain points. Is clients struggling with their employee mobile strategy? You have employees out there who are BYOD or corporate only. And again, I see this time and time again where they're struggling with controlling data flow between their on-prem and their mobile devices. Data breach and data leak is one of the biggest problems. And again, getting to the core of what the pain points are with corporate devices, understanding, are they struggling with multiple different devices? Are they struggling? Are they just a single device strategy? Do they only have Android or iOS? Or do they have multiple devices? Do they have iOS, Android, and tablets? Do they have a policy where they allow multi-factor authentication, single server sign-on? Do they have password policies? If the answer to these is yes, then we're pushing towards that more complex tool set. We're pushing towards them requiring Intune over the free version. And this is where we can certainly go into depth, and as we build out the solution, and the reason for me coming on board, in fact, was to help refine and define these stories. But again, what today is about is just planting the seed and giving you the understanding that we have to understand the pain points and the buyer provocations here. Intune is highly integrated with Office. It's highly integrated with rights management solutions. So, for example, if you want to control who can see what documents, if you want to control who can write what documents, then the free version is not going to cut it. You're going to need the paid version in order to do that. Similarly, with as I touched on before, with policies, who can manage end user behavior, cutting, copying, pasting. The free version is not going to cut it. So again, important to understand their pain points, what's important to the user, and then we can go in and we can make the case for you need this version over this version. So hopefully that's helpful, understanding the differences at a feature level, and then understanding what the client's pain points are, what's important to them, and then what we can indeed sell them. So let's jump into the third, selling upsell issue, which is security services. So I don't think Microsoft actually do a very good job of laying out what security is available in what plan for Office 365. So I actually went and I created this chart, and what this chart really outlines is, in sort of layman's terms, what security features are available with what plan. So as you can sort of see here, on the left-hand side, we've got the various Office plans. We've got Office Plan 1, Office Plan 2, which are the standalone email plans. And then we've got the bundle plans, F1, Business Essentials, Business Premium, and then all of the enterprise plans. And as you can sort of see here, they all include spam, they all include message encryption, they all support S/MIME, and then the rest of the features are broken out into the various different plans, right? So in-place archive as opposed to unlimited archive. So this is kind of a common misconception. Unlimited archive is 100% unlimited data storage in your plan. So, for example, E3 comes with 100 gig capacity of email. However, there is unlimited archive capacity in E3. So you can, when you hit your 100 gig, or even before that, you can start using journaling and you can move your data over to unlimited archive. However, in the plans that don't have unlimited archive, you have a finite amount of data. So, for example, in Online Plan 1, for example, or Business Essentials, Business Premium, or E1, which, by the way, all have Online Plan 1 as their email, you get 50 gig of email data. Now, what happens is you can segregate that 50 gig into N email accounts. So you can basically have your primary email, and then you can have an archive repository. So you can segregate 10 gig as your primary email, and you can separate the remaining 40 into an archive account. And that's what's meant by the term in-place archive. It's basically telling you that you can separate your existing space, your allotted space, and you can basically separate a portion of it as an in-place archive. You don't get any more storage. Your 50 gig is your 50 gig, but you can separate and allot a certain amount of it as an in-place archive. So data loss prevention, DLP. I think everybody's familiar with this term. The thing I love about Microsoft's DLP solution, and you find this across the 365 ecosystem in general, is it's highly integrated. So with a lot of other DLP solutions, they just work with email. This isn't the case with Office 365. DLP works with email. It works across SharePoint. It works across OneDrive. And that's a fantastic use case. I bring this up because it's important for everybody to be aware of that. It's important for everybody to use that as a selling point for 365. When you want to stop data leaving the confines of your ecosystem, you don't just want it not leaving email, you want it not leaving your entire ecosystem. And that's a really, really important selling point where Microsoft has an integrated ecosystem. And if they set a DLP policy to patch against social security numbers, it will look for that. It will look for that filter in email, in OneDrive, in SharePoint, across multiple systems, and stop that data leaking if it finds that cipher. Similarly, other systems are integrated the same way, and that's one of the benefits of Office 365. So anyway, the security services go on and on and on. I'm not going to go through them all. We can certainly have a separate session on security services. What I want to go on to now is I want to focus on how we sell security services. So as you can see, if the driver for selling is unlimited data, meaning if the customer says, if the customer's, intent on saying, all I care about is I want to have unlimited data, then we're going to sell one of these plans. If the customer says, well, it's important to me that I have SharePoint, and it's important to me that I have OneDrive and email and Teams, then a bundle is the sales driver. So again, this comes down to understanding the client's needs and delivering on those needs. Now, there's more. Sometimes these aren't the only drivers. There's multiple, and I'm not even touching the surface. The list, I could spend a day going on about these. If the driver is price, I put a heat map here. The price is low here. The price is high here. So it gets hotter and hotter and hotter, right? So the price is more expensive. The higher, the richer the feature set, the more expensive the bundle. So again, really simple here. And then the last one, the one we're really talking about, is security services. So if we're driving a compliance bundle, then you're really going to sell one of these two. And again, if they're intent on a bundle, then you drive one of these two. If they're intent on email only, then Online Plan 2 is the only solution for them. Now, having said that, you can further enrich the solution by adding Enterprise Mobility Suite or a third-party solution such as Mimecast to further enrich the solution as well. And again, we can provide more data points on that, and or have a session later in 2019, and Bob will cover that. So that is security services. Again, buyer pain points, buyer provocations. So the buyer pain points here are we need to understand the client's primary driver. Is storage a concern? Is security, core security a concern? Spam, antivirus? Is service availability a concern? Is controlling data flow a concern? Data leak prevention, right? Is controlling access to assets a concern? So rights management, et cetera, et cetera. The list goes on. There are so many drivers that determine in here what their driver is as to what potential plan they would go with, which is why I kind of mapped this out this way, because hopefully this will give you a good flow based on understanding what their driver is and mapping it to a respective plan. So hopefully that's helpful. So if security is the concern, then as I said, we're looking at one of these two plans. We're looking at Email Plan 2, E3 or E5. And then it's important to understand that if there's too many tools performing the same job, when one or two tools can do the same job, I'm of the opinion that it's honestly cheaper and it's also more secure. And that's always a good argument to go into the customer with. When the customers say to me, oh, well, I've got, tool A, B, and C doing this for me, I always step back and say, well, hold on a minute. Your cost for those tools, plus your administration to do it, plus if you've got a chain, think of this as a chain link. it's easier to have less links in the chain because it's less vulnerable, number one, and it's also probably cheaper from a licensing perspective. It's also probably cheaper from a administrative perspective. Those are the arguments that I make time and time again. And also, again, the same argument here. Has security become a primary function of IT as opposed to the running of their core business? These are the arguments that I make. And again, on the right-hand side, you know, these are the buyer provocations that we're going to make. I'm not going to run through them. You'll get the deck and you can certainly read through them. So Azure Active Directory, number 4. This is probably one of my favorite subjects. I run into clients all the time, and certainly in our own organizations, we see this where, you know, if I said, everybody raise your hands if you just have one login, I know that nobody on this call is going to raise their hands. We all have multiple logins. And what Azure Active Directory does is it takes us one step towards solving that problem, right? So a solution like Azure Active Directory is engineered to provide that single server sign-on experience with a marriage between on-premise cloud services, public cloud services, managed services, and be that conduit between the user, their devices, and all of the services that are consumed. And that's the best way I can explain this. Now, having said all that, let's talk about the buyer pain points, the buyer provocations, and then I'll talk about which are the best solutions for which scenarios, because it comes in a couple of flavors. So buyer pain points. So do you have, or does your user have a disjointed or inconsistent user experience? What I mean by that is, do they have multiple logins? Are they having a bad time resetting their passwords? Are they having, is it painful? Do they have heavy overhead administering? All of that stuff. Secondly, are they in a multi-cloud environment? Well, there's almost certainly very few organizations that aren't making use of on-premise, cloud, managed services. And so the answer to number 2 is almost certainly yes in today's day and age for 95% of organizations out there. Are they managing multiple passwords? Again, same answer. Is there poor or no authentication? This is a security vulnerability. This is at the heart of why Azure Active Directory exists. And then all of this compounds into number 5, which is high administrative costs. Number 6, complexity and cost. Just never a good thing for an organization. And guess what? The chart at the top, it solves all of this, right? So the buyer provocation is, we can solve your issues. We can solve your life by providing you a single sign-on experience, a self-service password reset, so you don't have to have, 500 people calling the help desk to reset that password. And it's not just a self-service password reset for one node. It's a self-service password reset for every system that federates into Azure Active Directory. And then number 3, multi-factor authentication, making it a lot more secure, making it secure to the identity of the user and all of the devices that they happen to attach to it. And then finally, what management care about, right? More efficient administration and cheaper management of their costs, right? And predictable costs at that. So let's talk about the flavors. So depending on how complex their environment is, Azure Active Directory, the way that it works, if we go back to old school, if we go back to what was DirSync and we go back to what was ADFS, it can sync your password, or it can sync your password one direction, or it can federate your password. It can do a two-way sync of your direction, meaning your password goes both directions, and you can manage your password from here, and it will sync your password back to on-prem. And so the way this is basically working is there is an AD connector tool that sits in between the on-prem and Azure Active Directory, which for all intents and purposes is and it sits on Azure, which, by the way, is where about 60% of Office 365 resides. It's on the Azure infrastructure. So Azure Active Directory Basic is the recommended approach if you're just connecting to what I call the native services. If you're connecting to Microsoft Azure and you're connecting to 365. If you're connecting beyond that, if you're connecting to managed services, if you're connecting to SaaS-based services, public cloud, private cloud, and Office 365, then you want to go the next layer. You want to go Azure Active Directory Premium 1 and Azure Active Directory Premium 2. The reason for that is this takes the next layer and gives you all of those fantastic services like MFA, SSO, self-service password reset. And I'm going to jump forward a few slides. Actually, I'll go to this slide. The difference between all of these is here. So Azure Active Directory is already built into Office 365, and it's the free version. So people don't actually know this, but when you buy 365, you actually get this free version. And what this gives you is the ability to log into Office 365, and it's just there. So the basic version allows you to take it one layer further, and it allows you to basically do self-service password reset at a cloud layer only. And then P1 takes it one layer further with on-premise write-back and multi-factor authentication. So that takes it the next layer. And then the next layer gives you all of that, but it also gives you Cloud Access Security Broker, or CASB. And again, we can go into a session that goes into this in a lot more detail. I did put some slides about this in the agenda. I'm going to jump to those quickly. So, sorry, in the appendix. In the appendix here, there are slides about this. So you've got slides that go into Azure Active Directory, and then you've got the features on these. So please have a look at these. I'm not going to delve into these, but you can see there are slides on these that go into what the actual features are. But basically, you'll see the features are here, and you'll see based on the different layer that you go to, you'll see that it sells at a different layer. Okay, so number 5, understanding teams, understanding collaboration and efficiency. So let's sort of step back to how Office 365 was a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. So what Microsoft realized as they built Office 365 up, and they built it up sort of 3-4 years into it, they realized that they had this ecosystem that was built of separate applications. Skype, it was actually Link at the time, Exchange Online, OneDrive, SharePoint, etc., Yammer, Delve, all of these tools. But what they realized was the collaboration was being driven by individuals. The software wasn't actually driving collaboration, and the software layers were staying in their own lanes. SharePoint knew about SharePoint, OneDrive knew about OneDrive, Exchange knew about Exchange, and so forth, right? There was no integration, and to say there was no integration is a little unfair. There was limited integration between the various pieces of software within the ecosystem. And so what Microsoft did was they made this decision to come up with Teams. And so what Teams does is Teams is built around the way that we work today. And so this is how I kind of frame this, is how we used to work and how we work today. So if you think about it, the modern knowledge worker today works in a very team-oriented way, but more importantly, they work in a very project-oriented way. And this is what Teams is about. Teams is about building virtual teams that do not have a location necessarily. They can be based in a location, they can be based remotely, they can be based in both. It is agnostic to that, and that's the point. A team is based on a project of N people with a location or no location. The point here that's important, however, is the integration between the services. And these software services are brokered at this point. And so the point is Teams utilizes these services and it brings these people into using these services. And that's the point of what Microsoft has done with Teams now. Teams is the central hub for collaboration and project efficiency. And that's what Microsoft have done. They've centralized Teams around the way that people work today. And so if it's a good upsell, and I've certainly found it a good upsell for people who want to buy a cheaper plan or they want to buy email only. And when I'm talking to companies and they're saying, well, we want email only, and I'm saying, well, what kind of work are you doing? Oh, we manage projects for boom, 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 boom. And I can't tell you how many times I've upsold companies into going with E1 or E3 just simply based on a Teams discussion, because they value the fact that they're using a project management tool and they can go with E3 now, and they can utilize the power that Teams will bring them collaboratively to work more virtually as a team. So it's an incredibly powerful entity for project-driven workforces. So understanding what Teams does, Teams exists in the bundled plans. It doesn't exist in the email-only plans. It exists to drive diverse project-driven workforces. Teams is a social media platform for businesses. That's an important phrase to socialize with clients. It is about getting virtual teams out of email and getting information and assets into a centralized business hub and talking about and working, getting assets involved around the project that they're working on. And that's really what Teams is about. And honestly, I cannot emphasize this enough, how much I've upsold based on that value alone. So Skype for Business, also important point here, is being replaced. It's out, and Teams is going to integrate all of that. So all of the chat, all of the video conferencing is going to be Teams going forward. And so it also obviously has full integration with email, Office, SharePoint, and then open meetings as well, which is a big feature inside of Teams. So again, here are the buyer pain points and the buyer provocations. If you're working in virtual, or remote, sorry, spelling mistake there, remote teams, if they are performing project-based work, in other words, really largely knowledge workers, if there's use of multiple or disconnected tools, inefficient project management or inefficient communication channels, and we've all experienced that one, right? And then project overruns in cost or time. Teams can certainly help alleviate this by putting it into a single tool that helps organize projects, teams, regardless of where they're located. Because it is 365 drives that mobile mindset, and then driving a stronger communication channel, helping manage costs, helping manage project timeframes, and all of that built around Microsoft's security framework, right? And with that, that is the end. So I'm going to hand it over for questions.
Yep, I'm just going to ask a couple here, Duncan. So first is, can you purchase security on its own, separate from an Office 365 plan?
So you certainly can. There are a number of Microsoft options for purchasing security on its own. So the Microsoft options come in a number of different bundles. EMS is probably the most successful bundle that Microsoft has sold, and it's certainly the one that they're pushing. And then the other flavors that I would certainly encourage are outside of Microsoft, such as Mimecast. So the reason for that, and that's more of an enterprise play, and the reason that would be pushed is because you're going to run into organizations where there simply isn't it comes down to a trust factor. Organizations simply say, Microsoft, great solution, great product. We simply don't 100% trust Microsoft with our security play. And there are data points to back this up, where if you look at the organizations, the top 100 companies, I believe there's about 50% of them have an attach rate using a third-party security provider, and it's not because Microsoft security is subpar. It's more that the Fortune 100 companies just believe that they need a secondary provider for their security. So it's more of a strategic decision for those upper companies. So just be aware of that as a strategy more than a play. And actually, I'd put it into more of the Fortune 500 than the Fortune 100.
Cool. And another one actually just came in. Can RapidScale migrate a customer from a third-party email product to Office 365?
Yes, and there are, so this is an interesting question, and it's actually one that we are having multiple discussions around. So I'll give a little bit of, so the short answer is yes, and it can be migrated from a number of different formats. So we're talking about POP, IMAP, all of the native exchange, et cetera, all of the above, right? So what we are actually going to kick off in Q1 is a centralized migration project, because what we actually want to do is centralize our migration strategy around and make it more fluid for our clients, so that the migration can be a little more agnostic and automated. And so myself and the service delivery manager are actually defining the beginnings of a project where we are looking at the APIs of a number of tools so we can provide the front end for the migration tool. So the short answer is yes, but the broader answer is we're looking to actually take it one stage further and automate migrations so that they can be a little more turnkey.
And for time's sake, we'll just wrap it up with this final question. If you can speak high level to what RapidScale is doing to help drive user adoption for Office 365.
Yeah, so that's a great question as well. So we are actually, I'll speak more broadly to what my role is and what I'm doing to bring on a roadmap. So adoption is, a fantastic subject, and adoption is actually really important. So in 2019, one of the commitments that myself and the leadership team have made to all our partners is we're going to start actually publishing a partner-facing roadmap. So on that, you will actually see a lot more value add going into the 365 product set. And we're actually in discussions with some potential partners right now. And we're looking, I can say we're looking to be very aggressive with 365 in particular, as well as, a number of other products. Is why I was brought on board. But in short, I think the exciting thing for you as partners is there's going to be visibility into what our development roadmap will be. And on that, you will see that there will be a strong adoption strategy for how we're going to help partners and end users certainly succeed with the product set going forward. It will certainly be a lot stronger going into 2019.
Great. And that wraps it up, Duncan. We're good to go.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Duncan.
Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Summer.
Yep.
Thank you. I'll just close it out by saying I wish everybody great holidays, enjoy the new year, and look forward to seeing you out there on the road. Appreciate everything, and best of luck closing out 2018.